Housing and Economic Development Committee, and we're taking up 3 items today. First is finalizing the Ashton Village Plan, and the second is a review of development trends in White Flint, and the final item is ZTA 2008, zoning text amendment. So last time we worked our way through the Ashton Village Plan, we got pretty much through just about everything except for one specific issue, which was this question of what format the design guidelines will be in. We asked the planning department to do a review of sector plans and master plans, mini plans, to see if there's a pattern about how we use design guidelines. The conversation that we had was that typically the smaller area plans have more of a design focus because you're talking about a more discrete number of properties, generally speaking, and so it's more realistic to have a stronger emphasis on specific design elements, whereas when you're doing bigger, more complex plans, it can be a bit more broad and kind of frameworked rather than, nitty gritty. So today we're joined by Councilmember Navarro, who I'm sure represents the area, and I imagine you represent. You go all the way through Olney, right? So this is well within the boundary, not even close to the edge, I'm going to guess, right?
No, it's still pretty much part of my district, of course. Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, I knew it was part of your district. I was just curious if it was towards the edge of your district. And great, glad to have you here.
I want to thank you and the PHED committee for all the work that they've done so far, and working with the community and the alignment with everything that we are leading on in terms of missing middle, but at the same time recognizing, as you were just saying, that things like design guidelines in this case, are so important, especially for that really amazing part of the county. So, just wanted to be here and watching everything you guys have done, and again, very much appreciate all the work.
Thank you. Glad you're here. And Councilmember Jawando is on the phone, at least for a few minutes, and then he'll join by video. And Councilmember Friedson is here. So Pam, do you want to turn to the packet and catch us up? Packet is on the council website. Obviously, everybody knows how to find those. So go ahead, Pam.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. This packet for the remaining piece that we do need to cover for the Ashton Village Plan really does focus on this one issue. As the chair has mentioned, it really is about whether the design guidelines, which are currently, there's a chapter 3 of the plan that has the broad overarching sort of design guidelines for the plan area. This is the broad picture that we think of when we think of how things should occur in the Ashton area. And then it has a more detailed chapter, I think it's chapter 5, which is titled design guidelines. If it stays in the plan, it should probably be renamed design recommendations or vision or something other than guidelines, because we do think of the ones that tend to accompany a plan. Those are called guidelines, and there's a process by which the planning board can modify those. And so the discussion really came down to whether those design guidelines should be an accompanying document or one that is included in the plan. And as the chair mentioned, the planning board and planning staff have sent over, and it's attached to the packet. It's a review of the last 15 years, how our design guidelines covered in master plans, and it varies, but a lot of the design guidelines that are small in size, I will say, so a few pages, tend to be ones that get included in the plan. Some of the larger ones, so maybe less so whether the size of the plan matters, as maybe it matters the size of this design guide. The design guidelines, the ones that are large in scope and nature, tend to accompany it. But there is a quote in the staff report that was sent over that basically says the zoning code requires any review of development in an area to substantially conform to the recommendations of a master plan and any design guidelines that have been approved by the planning board, which is pretty clear that I think one thing to consider here, or just note for the community, is in zoning and in what the planning board has to find a necessary finding in, both are given a lot of weight. Like they're not, one is not substandard to the other. So I just wanted to make that clear for the community.
Can you expound a little bit on why you make that point? I think you're getting at something here, but I'm not sure if I'm not sure it's totally clear what you're getting at.
So the point I'm trying to make is, and what they made clear in what they accompanied is, the staff have to comment on what are the recommendations for this area, for this property in this master plan location for this development application. What's in the master plan? What does the master plan say? And what do the design guidelines say about this property and what is before you in this application for site plan? And the board has to review both of those, and that's in the zoning code requires that. So just wanted to make it clear that it's not as if a reference isn't to the design guidelines in a manner in which the board will be not alerted to the fact that they exist, and they need to review what are the recommendations in the design guidelines, just to give some comfort to people either way. Because somebody else watching this who's maybe interested in a different area of the county where there's a different master plan, where the design guidelines are not in the master plan, might think, well, now maybe these design guidelines are less important. They are not less important whether they are in or out of the document. That's all I'm trying to say. And so what is before the committee is really, this idea, you've heard from community members that feel very concerned that design is a very important part of what they consider for their community, and they'd like to see the design guidelines remain in the plan. Council staff has noted that to make any change to those guidelines would require a minor master plan amendment. And so whatever gets put into those guidelines and into the plan will stay, really. It is very difficult. It doesn't happen almost ever for, a master plan to go back and make an amendment for design guidelines. And so if something becomes difficult, then you have to work around it. And there are just a couple things that are in there that are, numbers. Could those numbers hang somebody up later? Although, last time at the last meeting, Director Wright was very clear. She said we had some design guidelines that weren't as specific in Sandy Spring, and some of the resulting development made us reconsider that in Ashton. And that's an important part of why this is here. So that's just a summary of sort of what's in the staff report. It really is about a dialogue back and forth. And I just wanted to clarify that whether design guidelines are in the plan or accompany the plan, planning board has to consider them in review of the site plan or development application before them.
Thank you. All right, why don't we turn to Gwen Wright, and welcome your comments here, and then we'll go to council members.
Thanks. And I think Pam covered it well. We went back and looked at the last 15 years of our master plans and really found that it was pretty much evenly split, half and half. Half had guidelines incorporated into the document and half had separate guidelines. In fact, a number of the plans you've reviewed most recently, including the Shady Grove minor master plan amendment that you just did, had the guidelines incorporated into the document. We have never had an issue with a request to amend design guidelines, whether they've been inside the document or outside the document. So I understand council staff's concern that, if such a request ever did come up, that we would have a long process. But I will just share that in the 15 plus years that we have been doing design guidelines, we have never had either an applicant or a planning board request us to amend design guidelines. The guidelines are there, the applicants and staff and board know they have to work with them, and they do. And we tend to find our way to successfully navigate regulatory cases and use the guidelines appropriately to do that. So in some ways, I'm just not as concerned perhaps about the problem that is being raised that, someday you might need to change these guidelines, because honestly, that has never really been an issue. I do think that, again, we appreciate the PHED committee sort of pushing us to take something that perhaps has been implicit and make it explicit in terms of what our policy is about guidelines. So at the very end of the memo, that we provided to council staff that's in your packet, we lay out what we think the policy should be, and that's based on our many years of practice, which is that in general, guidelines are going to be within a master plan, except in specific cases where, because of the complexity of the design issues, it really merits a separate document. Because of the length of the guidelines, which is typically related to the complexity of the design issues, that it merits a separate document. Or in a unique situation like Bethesda, where density allocation is actually tied to meeting the design guidelines and going to the design advisory panel. I mean, there's an actual connection in the zoning code to the guidelines and allocation of density. Then we think it should probably be, a separate document, which is both complex and long, so it meets the other criteria as well. Thank you for suggesting we put down in paper what our practice has been, and so we've attempted to do that. And I think all of that results in our continuing belief that the planning board got it right in terms of putting the design guidelines, recommendations, whatever term you all would like to use, in the actual Ashton Village sector plan.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll just share my view here and then turn it to my colleagues. I think we should keep them in. I think the framework that planning has prepared, showing their practice over the years, seems like it's been fine. And I also think it could be done differently. If we wanted to establish a practice that they're external, that's a possibility. It doesn't necessarily seem like it would be that, a huge difference, but I do feel like in this plan, to take it out now would be, it would really, it wouldn't show the right kind of fidelity to the community process. I think there's a high level of expectation that it will be in the plan, and I don't see a compelling reason for it not to be in the plan. And I think if we want to change the practice, we could change it going forward, but I wouldn't recommend we change it now. I think that we've got a plan here that hopefully is going to get some great results for the community, but a lot of the satisfaction about that will be over this particular issue. And, I think that it's a way to smooth the process for change and help, ease the conversation about what is going to be a change to the area. And I think it gives people comfort. So I don't see a downside to it. And I think there's a lot of benefits. And I think if planning wants to do it differently in the future, that certainly is an option, but I'd recommend we stick with this way for now. So, okay, I'll go to my committee colleagues first, and then we'll go to Councilmember Navarro, who's asked to speak. Councilmember Friedson.
Thanks. First of all, thanks to planning for putting together some guidelines for the guidelines. I was a little bit concerned and of not really having a policy to fall back on of how we decide to do this, when it's included and when it isn't included. I think having something written down and something that we can turn to that everybody agrees on is important. In light of that, I'm happy moving forward with this and keeping it consistent. I do think that this is among the most common frustrations that we hear from community members related to the design guidelines and whether or not there is significant input and whether that they're being held to, so to speak. And so I do think that this, as the chair mentioned, gives fidelity to that, I think is a good way to put it. But most importantly, I just think that having a policy and being consistent on that policy is really important as part of the planning process. And so I appreciate the fact that we're moving in that direction, and agree that we ought to keep this as part of the plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, I agree. I think makes sense to keep it in, and especially with the explanation from planning, which is really helpful. And yeah, so I think I agree. I don't think we have any disagreement here.
Councilmember Navarro.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the fact that the committee seems to be poised to support this. I do believe it's great that there has been this, that planning has taken a look at this writ large, but also recognizing the particular characteristics of this area. And of course, what the community has communicated, which has always been, we're open to more amenities and more housing, but please pay close attention to this particular issue. I think this strikes a really good balance, and thank you.
Thank you. Terrific. Well, I think no further ado. So we don't have to make a motion because the version that's before us has the guidelines in it. So without any additional comment, I think we need to vote on the sector plan itself, right? Pam, I think we have not already.
I think it's up to you, but we went through every single recommendation in it, and you all took. Well, Councilmember Jawando was absent, but
Well, we can give Councilmember Jawando a chance to cast his vote since he was absent for the last one. So, great. Why don't we do that? We have the amended plan before us. All those in favor, show of hands. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Glad you're here. Let's move to the next item. And thank you to the staff. We'll see you at full council for the review, but appreciate your great work here and look forward to getting results for the community. So thank you. Thank you, Chair Anderson. All righty. Now we're back with the same team, different players. We're taking up the development trends report for White Flint. So Pam.
Yes, good morning. You have a briefing this morning from the planning staff who've had some consultant assistant and recently completed what they titled Advancing the Pike District Development Trends Infrastructure Update and Short-Term Solutions. And so this morning, this is about the committee members receiving this briefing on what is in the report. What are the trends that have been noticed in the report? What's the status of infrastructure, and a review of what these recommendations are. But we're going to schedule later after the budget when we have more time, pull in some other stakeholders and interested parties and have a fuller discussion later in the summer about the actual recommendations that are in the report that's before you. But this morning is really for you to just hear about it so that you can come up with any questions or thoughts you have on it, and it'll give you some time to reach out to planning and discuss those further before there's comments and work session on recommendations. Okay.
All right. Well, I want to make a comment or two and invite my colleagues to do the same, and then we'll turn it to planning to go through the report and share the presentation. There's so much to say on this topic. I think the progress of this part of the county, as well as some of the challenges, are really emblematic and important to understand, because in 2010, when the council passed the White Flint sector plan, and we followed up that plan with White Flint 2 and even surrounding areas, Rock Spring, I think there was an expectation that having that plan, creating that plan was going to open the floodgates, and we were going to see a lot of investment coming in and a lot of transformation happening. I think the vision is right, but what has happened in the ensuing years has been a very slow amount of progress in fulfilling the vision. And I think that's tied to broader challenges facing the county. On the one hand, you've had a slowdown of federal spending, particularly through NIH over this period of time. You had some consolidation in the life sciences sector out of the county. But you also had a lot of county policies that made it harder and less likely to get development. For example, the moratorium, which was a cloud over a fraction of this part of the county, that made it really unclear whether, if you could line up all the money, could you actually proceed to implement part of the plan. And I'm pleased that we finally have, driven that cloud from the sky, and broadly speaking, I think we'll hopefully start to get more results. But I think what the report shows is very broadly that we're not going to get the transformation of our older suburban footprint into a really exciting, dynamic, urbanized footprint. We're not going to get that without a stronger job growth trend in the county, because it's the growth of high-paying jobs that incentivizes the private sector to build new housing to meet the demand. And then without that, they're not putting up the buildings. They're not making the changes. We still have a lot of those shopping centers that look fairly the same as they did, years ago. There was a lot of anticipation when this, the JBG building went right up. But I'm told they sold that building a few years ago at a hefty loss. Meanwhile, the White Flint Mall is dirt. The White Flint Metro is vegetation. And then there's a lot of concrete in the shopping centers. So I think it speaks to the need for us overall to do a better job with economic development and take it more seriously, and to make the kinds of changes we've been trying to make, like dealing with the moratorium, Bill 2920, the focus on labs, the Purple Line. All of these things are going to create a more favorable environment, broadly speaking, and hopefully that rising tide will bring companies more to the area. And we have a sudden surge in life sciences biotech activity, and that's very promising, and we may yet be able to leverage that into White Flint. So that's the kind of broader context as I see it. I also want to say I would love to do a follow-up at the committee, not here today, but I would like to do another discussion about the East County and development trends there, and how are we going to deliver on the vision there, which is, no less important and actually very similar in a lot of ways. A federal lab or federal agency intended to be the focal point for a broader community revitalization. So I would like to do a PHED on East County generally, because I think the county has lost some of the momentum that we had to make that change, and to bring it home for East County. Last point, I think we'll get into this stuff, but I am growing increasingly skeptical of this conversation about the county paying to build a academic building at the White Flint Metro. County executives talking a lot about that. I think it's trying to create an illusion about having an economic development strategy that really isn't there. And we've got a academic building at the Universities of Shady Grove, and we need the University of Maryland to focus, University of System of Maryland to focus on programming it. And we need to keep our eyes on the ball. So I don't want to, overemphasize that particular idea, because it's not a real idea. It's talk, but at the same time, I think, we're here to see what the private sector is doing and how the public sector can support that. And I think a lot of that is about the infrastructure, the other issues that we're going to be hearing about today that we've got to move on. So Councilmember Friedson, who has been working diligently with the partners in the area, and I sometimes lose track of these kind of details, but I know we had some conversations a few years ago about White Flint and the trends there, and that may have been what led to the assignment for this report. So, Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for your comments. Thanks to planning for really great work here. I think it highlights a number of things. First, the challenges in this area, I will point out, are a microcosm of the challenges in the county. In fact, there's been more tax growth in this area than in the county at large. And so the idea that this area and this sector plan has underperformed expectations is true because we put a lot of lofty expectations on this, but it's also true that it has outperformed the rest of the county, which shows its importance and also shows the challenges broadly in terms of economic development and growing the tax base that the county is experiencing, and how important this area is to realizing the full potential that the county has. I think if we'll go through this report, I think a few things speak to it. One is the need to advance the core infrastructure promises that have been made in order to make the private sector investment more attractive, and we have to fulfill that. I mean, the plans, White Flint 1 and White Flint 2, were predicated on an urban environment, turning parking lots into vibrant places, and that requires predominantly public infrastructure to be the bones and the skeleton of that, with the private sector making the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in investment to fill in, and attach to those bones. And there has been less private sector focus than we would want, but we have to do more public investment as well. And there's also a challenge that we have had, unlike other urban districts. There isn't really an urban district here, and there have been a lot of efforts on a pre-bid entity. There's been a tremendous amount of stakeholder input, and this report really highlights the need to have that cohesive, community-led, public-private, business resident entity that's formalized to be able to move these recommendations forward, to be able to move this area forward. And so this report talks about really high level, and then it talks about very specific details. In the middle are those couple of ideas that I think bridge the gap. And so I'm hoping that as we have this conversation, we talk about some of the recommendations, and we talk about some of the progress, or the areas in which there hasn't been as much progress as perhaps we would have liked, that be part of the conversation as well, because really that is part and parcel to what we're talking about here. And I do think that as we talk about the county, we have to talk about economic development, not just part of the conversation, but part of every conversation. And when we talk about economic development in the county, I don't think that it happens unless we realize the full potential of this area and the Pike District. I think it is so central. And the good news is there's a lot of consensus on the importance of realizing the full potential here. There are some disagreements between the county executive and the council on certain things, but the importance of this area is really at the forefront. And with the private sector and the public sector, there's some disagreements of structure and costs and policies, but there's broad agreement of the importance of realizing the potential here. So appreciate all of the work. I look forward to this conversation, and look forward to it being part of a continued and broader conversation as we move this forward.
Super. Thank you. So welcome to our team. Carrie, Atul, Walker, Natasha. I imagine you know how you're doing the presentation, so I'll turn it to you to walk us through. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Reamer. And I really appreciate it. I did want to ask our chair if he had any words he wanted to say before I jumped in.
Great. I didn't see him on screen. So
you didn't see him on screen. Okay. I'll go ahead and
I know
start
he's
up.
here, but I think he maybe took a call. So.
No worries. And if he wants to jump in, we have that opportunity. Did want to introduce our team here. I think you might have covered everybody, but I'm the chief of the Mid-County Planning Division. I also have Atul Sharma with me, the supervisor for the project, Walker Freer, who's our project manager, Todd Foley King, our real estate specialist, and Natasha Fahim, our urban designer. And so, you know, the purpose of this study is to identify short-term opportunities for success. So typically when we come to you, like we just did with Ashton, we're talking about these longer-term plans. This study was actually a little different. We really wanted to sort of think about some short-term actions that could be taken next 2 to 5 years to move this area forward. And I think the introductory remarks were really clear in that, you know, this is an award-winning plan, the 2010 plan. It was recognized by the American Planning Association and many other organizations. And actually on the next slide, you can see an image of the plan area, which shows you what the plan area looked like, a section of the plan area looked like before the redevelopment. So you can really see it was truly a parking lot. I think there was one tree in this entire area that you see before you. And then after the plan area was redeveloped with the Pike and Rose development, we had, you know, 200 trees and a lot of environmental improvements, green roof, truly a model for mixed use development. So you may ask, you know, why are we doing this study? Why now? And I think some of the comments at the introduction really hit on that. We have made some great progress as a county in this area, and we're recognized throughout the U.S. for it. But there, you know, there's definitely more to be done, and I think it's a really important sort of pivot point that we're at right now. So as you may know, we have such limited land area for development in the county, and I think the Thrive Montgomery plan, you know, as the council talks about that, we'll really hit on that. But we have so much land that's already developed or limited in terms of environmental resources that don't allow for that land to be developed. And so developing land by the metro station is really where we want to focus our growth. And this study is important because we want to make sure that, you know, we are taking these short-term actions to kind of push that forward. We also see this area as really important for creating new jobs and new housing. There's great capacity at this metro station. This is one of the few AMADA properties in the whole metro system that has as much land area as it does that's undeveloped. So there's really a lot of potential for the area in terms of development and creating more housing, creating more jobs.
Carrie, can I just want to interject if I could.
Sure.
One of the important things to know, as you know, but I just want to say it here publicly, the reason why we have been able to get that amazing redevelopment is because the company that owns the land, Federal Realty, has a very long-term horizon for its investment strategy. Most real estate developers don't invest and then hold for the long term the way that they do. And they're also not as capitalized with as much control as they are. And so when they want to do something that's big scale but may not pay off in the short term, they can do that. That's hard. Not a lot of real estate companies can do something that is incredibly expensive and may not generate a big return in the short term. And that's why this happened. And I think that's why White Flint Mall is dirt. So I just want to say, please, for those who are watching, don't say, well, since it's happened there, there's no problem in White Flint. We're just really lucky that we have this owner willing to make this kind of strategy here. Because if it wasn't for them, the whole area would just be unchanged. So I wanted to make that point. Please continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think that's a good point, and I I do think that is unique about this area is that, yes, that particular development is unique in that way for sure. And I think actually that kind of leads me into my next point, which is there's a lot of capacity left in the plan area. And we're going to go into that in a little detail here, but it's going to be really important to recognize that there's significant density for both housing and new jobs, new commercial development in the plan area.
It's amazing to see that visual, and it shows.
Yeah, it's a helpful it's a helpful reminder.
Great project.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, you can just better understand why we're doing the study, and I think our goals from this study were to really accelerate. We know it's a good plan, but we really wanted to accelerate the transformation of the area into a more mixed use and walkable area. And the next slide, please. We have actually, I'm excited that, in the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen some additional momentum in the area. I do think, most of what we'll be talking about today is, where we can improve. But we have seen an uptick over the last 6 to 8 months in terms of applications filed, a new concept plan. And this is both for White Flint sector plan area as well as White Flint 2. Which is just out, properties just outside of this metro station area. We've seen, over 2 million square feet filed in the last few months. So I think we're like, as I said, we're kind of at this pivot point or this, potential change here. And notably, one of those is an office building in the Pike and Rose area, but also what we call Rose Village, which is just west of Pike and Rose, and it's a different developer. It's not Federal Realty, and that applicant is working on a very large concept plan for Rose Village. So we are seeing some movement. Also, North Park at Montrose is a very large residential development that's happening. The next slide, please. Just moving on. I know we have a lot of information for you today, and want to make sure I move along quickly here. I did want to recognize that, public engagement's been a big part of this effort. We have worked extensively with the community. And one thing that we have heard throughout the process, and both our interviews with stakeholders as well as our community meetings, is that in order for the area to move forward, walkability is extremely important. And that's kind of a planner term, walkability, but it basically means how easy and safe it is to walk around. Our Thrive 2050 plan really talks about how 15-minute living is super important. Being able to walk to where, to do errands, to walk for enjoyment, for, as we have discovered in the pandemic, for mental health, it's super important too. And for equity and advancing Vision Zero. So we have heard this throughout the process, and we really feel that this is integral to moving this area forward. And that kind of takes me to my last 2 points. This plan this study is implementation focused. And if you go to the next slide, please. And actually the last slide I have kind of shows you what we feel are sort of the top priorities. And we definitely want to hear from you all, from our council members, to just sort of give us your input at the end of this presentation about what how you feel these priorities rank. But what we've really heard is, like, through our analysis, but also through our engagement, is prioritizing funding for projects that improve walkability is really important. And we've seen that in other areas that have, at a tipping point like this, have taken actions to improve walkability, and that's really propelled the area forward. We also think implementing elements of the proposed boulevard on Rockville Pike prior to the construction of bus rapid transit is a great idea. And when we talk about that, we're talking about maybe some temporary elements, pedestrian safety or walkability elements that could really create a different environment there that would make it feel like a more cohesive and walkable community. And then thirdly, supporting the creation of a bid. And this is something that we've heard from a lot of stakeholders. We had a couple letters of support from different stakeholders for the study, but establishing that bid is going to be really important to continuing to activate and create active streetscapes. and placemaking. And then lastly, supporting comprehensive evaluation of different infrastructure financing mechanisms. So we're going to go into that toward the end of the presentation in a little bit more detail with our real estate specialists here. And with that, I will actually turn it over to Atul Sharma, and he's going to walk through some activation examples we have worked on.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, please go. There you are. Great. Didn't see you.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all virtually. And for the record, I'm Atul Sharma. I'm an urban designer and supervisor of the special projects team in Mid-County that's undertaking this initiative. For this project, we were fortunate to assemble a very diverse team of staff that is not only intimately aware of the vision of the sector plan, but also brings extensive private sector experience in building walkable urban places from a design, transportation, and real estate development perspective. We've been fortunate as individuals to work on several large transformative projects in jurisdictions across the country prior to joining this awesome team at Montgomery Planning. And just wanted to highlight a few key trends that we've seen emerge in the past decade since the passing of the plan. So the first I wanted to talk about is this idea that even in places that do have transit infrastructure, even with capital T, as in we do in the Pike District, attractive walkable environments have really come to be considered as essential infrastructure. So when we are trying to attract private development, having attractive walkability and attractive streetscapes is almost like considered a prerequisite at this point. The second thing I wanted to highlight was that, given the intense competition for job creating uses, it's really become critical to create a sense of place there earlier on in the implementation process. What we've seen otherwise is that, developments might stall due to a lack of brand recognition or the existence of several competitors in any given metropolitan region. And we all know that our metropolitan region is extremely competitive. And then the third trend I wanted to share was that, private developers and public entities alike are increasingly undertaking more interim improvements and activation efforts across the country. These are often considered as a stepping stone, as a necessary step towards the final implementation of the larger, more capital-intensive projects. And this is especially true in areas like the Pike District that feature very large properties that can take multiple decades to develop, even in strong markets. Underutilized sites in the Pike District present a great opportunity for activation and interim uses. This can jumpstart sort of the implementation of some of the larger infrastructure. It can be used as a strategy to attract some employers, but it does need a coordinated effort between county agencies, partners, and property owners. And I think this is kind of related to the comment made previously that an entity that sort of manages those relationships is really important. On this slide, you see a few images. On the right is a photograph from Brooklyn. Two Trees, which is a private sector developer here, worked with some local nonprofits to activate this 11-acre riverfront site, which was planned for a large mixed-use development. They were going through a multi-year entitlement process, so didn't want to wait to create a there. They issued an RFP, and within 3 months of the selection of a partner nonprofit, they came in, they built this awesome bike park, some community gardens, and some play areas. And this operated as an interim use for 7 years. And then when phase 1 of this development was delivered, you got your high-rise mixed-use development. This part of the site was actually redeveloped into a more permanent park. And this was a great success. On the left is closer to home, Wonder Garden in Noma. We've all seen that beer garden be extremely popular, extremely successful, to the point that where it was, first built on a parking lot with very small investments. It was so popular that when that parking lot was redeveloped, it found a home in another part of Noma, and they even extended the lease from like 3 to 5 years. So, we've been sort of finding a lot of potential solutions that can apply to the Pike District, but we've also been doing implementation as we do this study. So, If we go to the next slide, you'll see, last year our team did a on-the-ground kind of walkability analysis that helped inform the council's decision to appropriate $2.9 million for pedestrian access improvements to the Whiteland Metro Station. That money is going to be used to remove the hot rides, which are dangerous, and really extend the crossing timings across the Pike and Old Georgetown. It's also going to lead to the creation of protected sidewalks with street trees. Again, creating that nice, attractive walking environment that connects the center, the locus of the plan, which is the metro station, to local destinations. If we go to the next slide. We've also been working hand in hand with the Regional Service Center, Ken Hartman, and his team, their consultant, Mayor Warner, to activate Banneker Street Pop-Up Park, which is really a future development site, but in the short term has been sort of, populated with amenities and services that residents can use. This is an effort that we'll be continuing to undertake with Ken and his team through the summer, again, trying to create that nice, attractive place in the Pike District that builds on that brand. And then next slide shows one of our most recent and very exciting projects that we are undertaking in partnership with MCDOT, Pete Fosselman from the County Executive's Office, local property owners, local residents. We're calling this the Pike District Connector. It is a 1 mile temporary path that will link the Bethesda Trolley Trail to the Montrose Parkway Trail. Really sort of create this linkage in this larger regional trail system that we think will be really useful and well utilized by residents and people coming to work in this area or even trying to get to the metro station. If you go to the next slide, later this year, we'll be partnering with the Better Block Foundation and local community members to build temporary hubs along the Pike District Connector. These things might include attractive artistic elements, seating, planters, etc., that really start to make a statement that the Pike District is a place built around pedestrians, built around cyclists. It's a place built for walking and going from one destination to the other, and operates as a holistic, walkable urban place. And we think that is so important to sort of push the Pike District beyond a collection of individual developments to a district that is sort of seamless and is connected to walking and cycling and transit. So all these efforts are really intended to further the vision of the sector plan. They should really be considered as stepping stones, and none of them are really intended to be replacements of the more sort of integral and very sort of important long-term recommendations. So I'm going to turn it over now to Walker Freer, who's going to highlight some more potential solutions that talk about how we can push the envelope on creating that walkable urban place. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Good morning. I'm Walker Freer, a transportation planner and the project manager for the Advancing the Pike District initiative. The 2010 Whiteland Sector Plan vision establishes policies for transforming an auto-oriented suburban development pattern into an urban center of residences and businesses where people walk to work, shops, and transits. In the decades since the sector plan, as we've noted, developments such as Pike and Rose, Noby Market, and North Bethesda Town Center have really breathed new life into the district. However, as the sector plan details, the success of the Pike District as an urban center still requires attention to the pedestrian experience, with the goal that all streets should be pedestrian-oriented and walkable. So in addition to temporary activations that will enliven underutilized properties, our recent report identifies several solutions to enhance access, mobility, and safety in the Pike District. The sector plan envisions Rockville Pike as a grand boulevard, uniting the east and west sides of the district. In addition to the wide sidewalks and bike lanes that are planned, the centerpiece of this boulevard concept is bus rapid transit operating in dedicated lanes. However, today, Rockville Pike is not safe or aesthetically pleasing. 3 through travel lanes operate in each direction with a 40-mile-per-hour posted speed limit. High traffic volumes, narrow sidewalks with minimal or no separation from traffic, and multiple turning lanes at wide intersections inhibit walkability. Rethinking how to achieve the sector plan's long-term vision of a multi-purpose boulevard for Rockville Pike instead of a high-speed arterial highway requires short-term flexibility and innovative approaches. Moreover, bus rapid transit on Rockville Pike is still in the design phase and is not expected to begin construction for at least 2 to 3 years. So prior to the construction of the boulevard and bus rapid transit on Rockville Pike, this report identifies a menu of potential temporary improvements to create a human scale environment on Rockville Pike, similar to streetscapes in downtown Bethesda, Silver Spring, and Wheaton. Our team is working with SHA and NCDOT to reduce the speed limit in narrow travel lanes in the core of the Pike District. In downtown Wheaton in 2019, SHA reduced the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, narrowed internal travel lanes to 10 feet, and added on-street parking during off-peak periods. Another option is to close outside travel lanes to create parklets or outdoor dining, as was done in downtown Bethesda and Silver Spring during the COVID-19 pandemic. To improve transit access, temporary bus lanes, dedicated bus lanes, and bidirectional bike lanes are also being considered. None of these options would necessarily move the curb to curb in the next few years. And so in the short term, the goal of these temporary improvements is really to move the county closer to achieving the sector plan's ultimate vision. A theme of this report is a focus on low-cost, high-impact projects, exemplified by the White Flint Metro Station access improvements and the Pike District Connector. Given the county's current fiscal limitations, the projects of this scale may be more feasible to finance and implement in the near term, as opposed to larger roadway improvement projects such as the White Flint West workaround. The White Flint Metro Station's northern entrance is also a priority infrastructure improvement for the Pike District. The county executive, as mentioned earlier, is proposing a bioscience campus at the Metro Station. We're actively coordinating with NCDOT and WMATA to encourage the station's northern entrance be integrated into future development, which will simplify access to the campus and reduce the county's expenditures. Natasha Fahim, sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Raven.
Just want to make a quick comment here. We spent $150 million or more for a bioscience campus at USG. I don't know where the money is going to come from for this idea. And we need to build the walkable, urbanized infrastructure so that the private sector can do its job here. And the money that we have needs to go to that. So I have a lot more questions about, what you're referring to. But I understand that you mentioned it in the context of this report. So please continue.
Sure, and we can definitely discuss that kind of once we move through the next set of solutions. At this point, I'll turn it over to Natasha Fahim to review our next set of solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Walker. Good morning, everyone. I'm Natasha Fahim, the urban designer in a special projects team. I'm leading the urban design and placemaking effort for this initiative along with my colleagues, Walker, Todd, and Atul. Next, please. So as we all know, like the successful places always rely on the quality of the great urban places and the buildings. That's exactly why that the White Flint sector plan tries to unify the White Flint area around the urban core that today we know it as a Pike District. Where active street public spaces, the streets, parks, and plazas organize the very built environment that gives a unique style and character to the area. The sector plan also includes a system of the public use spaces where people can gather for events and enjoy and recreation and do the recreational activities. White Flint sector plan recommends the proposed civic uses should construct early in the life of the plan to create the vitality for this urban core. And you see in these photos some of the great examples of the public open spaces and plazas in our study area. Also, in addition, the great urban places can be created in a temporary form through the placemaking effort. Underutilize the site through the Pike District can create a unique opportunity for the interim uses through the public arts, programming, and pop-up amenities that can help activate the area in a short term, as well as promoting the identity and branding for Pike District. Next slide, please. So as my colleagues Atul mentioned before, from beginning of this study, we started our collaboration effort with Ken Hoffman and the Regional Service Center, along with their consultant, Meyer Warner, to strengthen the Pike District rebranding and activation effort. And one of the great examples of those efforts was creation of the Banneker Street pop-up park beyond the convention center that Atul show you the pictures of it. Today, if you walk there now, the weather is getting warmer and nicer. You see that this unutilized site is getting used more and more with the visitors and the residents. In addition to all of those efforts, last year, through the midst of pandemic, we also expanded the scope in our initiative, and we added the COVID-19 response to help Pike District restaurants and businesses to expand their services to the community, as well as helping the residents to have more outdoor amenities to socialize in a more safer manner. We helped Chris Warner's team, the consultants, with the various of activation efforts, as well as creating the Pike District Connector that Atul explained you earlier. And with collaboration with MCDOT, we hope to get this implemented in the early summer of this year. To further help activating the area, we all know that the provisional entity has to be created. An entity that can manage the programming and maintenance and activation of all of this area before we get to the business improvement district known as BID. So as an interim measure, the White Link Downtown Advisory Committee has recommending establish a provision entity known as, for now tentatively they are calling it Pike District Partnership, something similar to Bethesda Urban Partnership, in advance of forming a bid. This entity will be responsible for advancing the goal of the sector plan, White Link sector plan. At this point, I will turn the presentation to Todd, our real estate specialist, to walk us through some of the details of the development trends and financing.
Thank you, Natasha. I'm Todd Foley-King, the real estate specialist with Montgomery County's Research and Strategic Projects team. The solutions our team's highlighted have come from the analysis we did of the development trends here. Next slide, Walker. The report identified 20 solutions to prepare the Pike District to catch the next wave of development when job growth, construction cost, and rents come into better alignment. It focused on development trends that we've seen since 2010, a little bit before, and the performance of the real estate market to generate those solutions, and was informed by a series of interviews we conducted with stakeholders from the Pike District, including some of the notable landowners and developers there. Next slide. Firstly, the report recognizes that there has been meaningful success and progress in the Pike District, as Councilmember Friedson stated in his opening remarks. We found that the pace of development since adoption of the 2010 plan more than doubled compared to the prior decade for both multifamily and commercial development, which is what's shown on the charts on the slide. The orange dashed line is the annual average development from 2001 to 2010, while the red line is the much higher annualized average from 2011 to 2020. So going forward, we should bear in mind that we are making progress. It is just that our vision for the Pike District is appropriately very, very ambitious. Secondly, we found that there remains a lot of development potential in the Pike District, and we heard from developers that the neighborhood remains very attractive over the long term, even if any particular project today is not viable in today's market. Nobody is selling and moving out. The graphic here shows the amount of additional square footage that could be built on each parcel under the existing zoning code. And we can see that there are several parcels that would allow for over 2 million square feet and multiple others that would allow for between 750,000 and 2 million square feet. And so for reference to understand how much that is, the Pike and Rose development, their sketch plan that lays out the entirety of what they can build allows for 3.4 million square feet. So we could build almost several more Pike and Roses in this area, which is quite a lot. Furthermore, much of this land is owned by developers whose interest is in building things, and they could start moving forward if economic conditions become more favorable. So there is a lot of value in getting ready for a future wave of development, even if we don't know exactly when it will occur. Despite those strengths, there were challenges that we found that prevented the Pike District from achieving all that we had hoped. We've listed those key issues here, and many of them link together and sort of flow through influencing each other. So firstly, the biggest level issue was that the past decade was not a good one for the office sector regionally, and Montgomery County in particular lagged in job growth, which limited demand for office space. That slow job growth in turn led to limited household formation, which limits the demand for new apartments. At the same time, and sort of unrelated, construction costs increased substantially, which is a nationwide problem. But both of these together lead to a reduced pace of growth, which resulted in the special taxing district not generating the revenues that we anticipated to support the infrastructure redevelopment that we desired. So within the plan, many improvements to streetscapes that are really essential for achieving the vision depend on the adjacent private sector projects moving forward, which we noted, occurred at a slower pace than we hoped because of the slowdown in demand generally and the increased construction costs. So ultimately, what it results in is the Pike District today not yet being that walkable location we envisioned, and this gap between the vision and the reality of the streets and boulevards that are out there is now a challenge for developers in their attempts to attract investors. That there's just such a gap between what looks so good on paper and what is a great plan and what we currently have in place. Our report includes 2 recommendations related to the challenges we found in the financing and implementing of infrastructure. And the first is to reevaluate the costs and to reprioritize the list of infrastructure that the special tax district would fund and that the county and private developers are expecting to generate a more realistic understanding of future funding and implementation. Secondly is to then expand from that to evaluate alternative revenue generating mechanisms to raise additional funds. And we have identified 4 potentially feasible alternatives, all of which I will note have significant drawbacks. We've listed those alternatives here on the slide and discussed them in detail in the report and can absolutely dive into any of them during the discussion. I'll note that our project did not dive deeply into all of these. We've sort of raised this as these are the 4 that we could find, and we should evaluate which of these are potentially the right application. Walker Freer will now discuss the schedule and next steps for our project.
Thank you, Todd. To just step back and give an overview of the project timeline, we began this initiative in March 2020, just as the pandemic was really emerging in the United States. So we really did try to pivot and integrate some responses that spoke to community needs that we were hearing as this project really geared up. We researched and produced the development trends report last summer and last fall. And we're currently focused on the last 2 components of this effort, creating streetscape design guidelines for the Pike District and the Pike District Connector, which we'll be working on this spring through this fall. So implementing the solutions identified in this report are really critical to creating a unique sense of place, attracting high-density development, and establishing the Pike District as a regional mixed-use destination. To accomplish this, the project team is coordinating with multiple county and state agencies, as well as WMATA, to implement many of the solutions that we discussed here today and that are included in the report. The Pike District, as noted, is also experiencing an uptick in development applications. So this effort is intended to support the county's Speed to Market initiative, which was released in February, enables concurrent review frameworks for transformative projects, and aims to position Montgomery County as a more attractive business environment. This spring, we're coordinating with property owners and stakeholders to evaluate streetscape elements for the Pike District, including furnishings, lighting, pavement materials, and landscaping elements. And we're also refining the design for the Pike District Connector, with the goal of being operational this summer. The planning department is partnering with Friends of White Flint for a kickoff community meeting on April 28th, and we certainly welcome your feedback here today. So for the final slide, I'll pass the baton back to Carrie Sanders.
Thank you, Walker. We would love to hear the feedback from the council members on this initiative. And if you don't mind, Walker, going back to the early slide that listed some of the priorities that we think are important, but kind of want to hear from all of you about, how you feel those rank and your planning. And these were the solutions that we tried to dive into a bit more detail today. Obviously, the report has a lot of content here. I did want to address, Councilmember Reamer, your question regarding the WMATA site. I do want to make it clear that, through this study, we are looking to advance that area, but we don't have a preference on what happens there. We just want to see the plan's vision realized. So I just want to make sure you understand that was, what we are hoping will happen. However, in addition to the plan being realized, is, we feel that the walkability is really important. So I know you've heard a lot about that today. And that's something that we've heard from WMATA as well. WMATA is, and the other stakeholders are frankly more interested in seeing walkability happen as soon as possible over other elements such as bus rapid transit. I'm just going to be blunt about that because I think, the ability to walk places is an urgent need. So I know that transit is also an urgent need for sure. Everything's urgent. But that is something that we heard through the process. And so you kind of heard that as a theme throughout our presentation. With that, I will turn it over to the committee members to give us feedback, and thank you.
Thank you. I think you put your finger right there at the heart of an important strategic question for us. And I have a few comments I'll make and then turn it to my colleagues. But first of all, I just want to strongly endorse the idea that we should be investing in walkable infrastructure for the Pike District first and foremost. And I think we've had this somewhat escapist idea that a grand BRT plan is going to carry us off into the sky and to a better place. And while we've been talking about that for all these years, we could have been doing more right here, right now to support the private sector's growth. And making the area urbanized is creating that fabric and that context that makes it more attractive, it's already served by Metro. Transit service is quite good there. And now that we've got, I believe we're getting back, Metro increasing its peak service so that half the trains don't stop at Grosvenor. They all go through to Shady Grove. We've got a lot of transit service for the area, but what we're lacking are some key features of that service, like, a northern entrance to the station or an attractive, appealing pedestrian environment. When I'm walking, and I occasionally, have walked in between the Metro station and, say, the conference center or Pike and Rose, it's like a desolate area for a pedestrian. And until we fix that, it's impossible to see the future for that area. And then that's going to limit the amount that people want to invest in it. So I really just strongly believe that while bus rapid transit is a long-term vision for the area, what we have to do is build the community that we want now and create that urbanized context that will be appealing, where life can happen and companies will say this is a great place to be, and then we'll get a lot more progress there. We'll get a lot more momentum there. So that was, I think, the spirit of that is partly behind why we wanted to do this report and why we wanted to move forward on the immediate improvements in pedestrian infrastructure and the placemaking. It's like let's stop talking about what might happen in 20 years and let's start talking about what we can do now to make a difference and take things, one step at a time, one day at a time. So, personally, that's I think we've got to fulfill the infrastructure promise. We got to do our part to build these connections in there, build that urban streetscape, and make it possible for everything else to flourish. And it's why I'm a little concerned, again, about this other idea of having the county spend all this money to build a building on top of the White Flint Metro property. Let's let the private sector do the building. That's what they do. They put up buildings and they get tenants. We have to build the street. Nobody else is going to build that. Like, we got to build that streetscape that people want. And there's like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure that we need to prioritize here. And we're just moving too slow. So, that comes up. We were talking recently about the financing. Like, maybe we should just take on more of the urbanized infrastructure financing as county obligation and then make it happen faster. That would probably do more to create conditions where companies are going to want to grow or locate or do development, than anything else we could do. Well, Councilmember Friedson.
Appreciate it. I agree with the second part. I'm not sure I totally agree with the first part. I understand the thought process of where everybody is coming from here, but the idea that somehow 355 BRT is not part of walkability just doesn't make any sense to me. The entire plan is based on a boulevard, which is at the core of creating walkability in the area. It's not just about the transit ridership of 355 BRT. We've made some progress there. We have $6 million coming from the state. We took significant efforts to make sure that we kept things moving and on schedule in the last budget season, and hope that will continue. I think we have a historic opportunity with an infrastructure package at the federal level, and in fact, put this near the top, if not at the top of our list for potential federal funding. This ties a number of federal entities and agencies together, which I think makes it uniquely attractive for federal funding. So, I think we got to get out of this idea that we create these zero-sum games when it comes to walkability and when it comes to realizing the potential of this area in terms of infrastructure. We've already done this. The second metro entrance was pitted against the channelized right turns at Old Georgetown Road and 355 and some of the pedestrian sidewalk improvements. And in the last capital budget, it was framed as an either or, when in fact those are complementary ideas to make the area more walkable, livable, accessible, and to create the urban footprint and infrastructure that we want to realize its full development capacity. And so I would caution this conversation to be sidetracked into a zero-sum game where we pick, which infrastructure project is more important, when most of the infrastructure projects that we're talking about actually work part and parcel in a complementary way to create the type of urban infrastructure. And if we create walkability in one small area that you then have to risk your life to cross 355, then you won't have a district, you'll have a project.
Yeah, can I just respond to you? I was under the impression that when we're talking about creating walkability, we're talking about 355, in part. This isn't something where we leave 355 untouched. So, you're referring to.
The way that it was framed is, it's should we be focused on 355 BRT or should we be focused on walkability? And my point is, you can't focus on walkability unless you're focused on 355 BRT. You could do interim steps, before the full project is implemented, because we don't want to wait that long. But the way that we frame and talk about this and ultimately implement it matters. to me. So I just wanted to note that because I think that it's really important, and the same holds true with the second metro entrance, where we've done the same thing, where we've said, oh, instead of the second metro entrance, we're going to eliminate channelized right turns and create better sidewalks in front of some of the development projects, when in fact you want to eliminate the channelized right turns to make it safer and have more properties that are within the half-mile walkshed to create a better environment. So I just think it's important that in order to meet the full potential of this area, we need walkability, and that starts with core infrastructure. And most of those responsibilities are government responsibilities, are public responsibilities. And if we want to see this area reach its full potential, we have to be serious about what we're willing to commit to and see happen. And I think some of those are short-term solutions that planning has done a really interesting job of putting forward some ideas. And there's already been, I think, good incremental progress on that by Meyer Warner and some of our other partners, and Chris Warner and Ken Hartman and others deserve credit for some of the creative approaches that they've taken, even in challenging environment during COVID. But ultimately, we need shovels in the ground. We need to create the private sector investment of hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. And in order to do that, we're going to have to commit on our side to the infrastructure that we've long been talking about. We have done some of it, but we haven't done all of it. We've gotten some of the development, but not all of the development that we want and the tax benefit that we want. So if we want the private sector to fulfill its potential, the public sector has to fulfill its commitments as well. So I just wanted to note that. I do think that walkability is critical here. I think that there are intermediate steps and long-term steps, and we need to do both, and they should be working together. And I just want to get out of this dynamic where we pit a long-term project against a medium-term or a short-term project, as opposed to saying, how does the short and medium-term project help us get to the ultimate long-term project and keep that long-term project on schedule? Because I think if we do one versus the other, we end up taking one step forward and two steps back, and that doesn't get us to where we want to go either.
Carrie, did you want to, maybe just kind of reframe some of the questions that you have for us, or
Sure thing. Yeah. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say I agree with Councilmember Friedson. I think the plan's vision is a strong vision, and I think all of the stakeholders that we've talked to are really supportive of the long-term vision, which does include obviously that boulevard on Rockville Pike with bus rapid transit. And so by no means would we not support that in any way. This study's, it's a little different than we typically do, because we're really looking at sort of like, how do we focus in the next 2 years, 2 to 5 years on sort of short-term measures to get us to that vision. But I completely agree that like it all has to happen for it to work. I will share.
Yeah, sorry, Carrie, like right there on the screen, you have it kind of laid out. I mean, the idea is, let's improve walkability, implement elements of the boulevard on the Pike prior to the construction of BRT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
that's kind of what I was saying, was like, let's rebuild this area, and then when BRT is ready, it will this piece will have been done, and that's so much less that we have to do of the rest of the system.
Sure, it's good. It can be phased. I think it's a balance, right? Because you don't want to be so focused on the short term that you don't advance the long term. Both are very important. I have, from my own experience, when I was in Northern Virginia, seen it done on Route 1, where I worked, in Arlington and Alexandria, where sort of the bones of the BRT were put in first, or the skeleton. Making sure that the bus stops are accessible, making sure that there's like a comfortable walking environment, to wait for the bus, and when you get off the bus, you can cross the street safely. So those items, putting those in place first, which is what was done in Virginia, I think sets the the transit up for success. And also sort of meets the ability to, when you get off Metro, be able to cross the street and walk, to the new developments from the Metro. So I think it all works together, but yeah, totally understand that we don't want to lose the long-term vision. It's more just, how do we get it ready so that, so we can set ourselves up for success in the long term.
Yeah, just one quick comment is on 335 BRT, one of the key elements to that is dedication of the frontage of the properties. And so anything that we do that talks about walkability should be focused on how do we take interim steps to incentivize dedication, to show progress on 355 BRT, which would help short-term and long-term goals, and then ultimately move 355 BRT forward. If we're seemingly focused on short term and somewhat indifferent towards 355 BRT and the ultimate boulevard that is literally the core of the Pike District, then we miss out on both. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I don't want to get too cute here where we focus on very modest short-term improvements that are slightly better than the current conditions, but not necessarily anywhere close to what we would want to do and what we would want to have, and then miss out or significantly delay the progress that we would have, because I actually think that we're making progress on that. And I think, pivoting, declaring defeat, 3/4 of the way through the game, I think is a failed strategy personally.
Yes, Councilmember Friedson, I think you're raising some really great points, and I think what we've found in our both analysis and looking at other places is like this idea of like how should we sequence the longer term. It's not about you get this or you get that. It's more about strategically sequencing that longer term project such as BRT. Some of the and it is happening in small increments even now, both from the county side and the private side. So you all have obviously appropriated some money for eliminating those hot rights and stuff. And then I'll use the most recent example we reviewed of the office building in Pike and Rose, where they've, as a part of that project, they've dedicated the land, but they haven't left the land just kind of unimproved, waiting for BRT to come when it comes. There is actually a very walkable, attractive space in that frontage of that building on the Pike, which is designed in a way that when BRT comes, you don't have to come back and rip all that out. It's really sort of thought through in a sequential way. So you get the land dedication, you get walkable environments today, but all that is done in the service of creating the longer term project, which is the sort of beautiful BRT Boulevard. So I think it's sequencing is really our sort of main sort of message here, is that if we can try to sequence that project as opposed to try to do this versus that, I think we'll all be gaining a lot more from it.
I appreciate that. I would just say the sequencing should be accelerating to me. I mean,
yes.
Widespread agreement on 355 BRT. The county executive is a strong supporter of it. The council has been a strong supporter of it. In fact, at one point we were talking about sitting here and studying whether we actually wanted to fulfill the boulevard idea or not, whether walkability was part of the consideration or not. I advocated against it. The council originally went in a different direction. We scrapped that and said, you know what, we want to get this to what we want, actually realize the full potential of this project and not do it halfway. And so we're all aligned. Everybody is on board. We have some progress with state funding. We have potential game-changing acceleration with federal funding that could become available. And so I want to get out of the conversation where we're declaring defeat and talking about sequencing and maybe delaying and choosing not to do things, and talk about what we want and what we think will actually move the needle and make things happen, and then do it and get it done. And I think that there is a potential right now in this moment to do that. And I don't want to lose the conversation where we're talking about, this area and talking about how we can delay things and push things off, which would undermine our ability to realize the full potential, as opposed to actually accelerating the full potential. If left to its own device, slowly but surely, perhaps in a way that isn't the most ideal, this area will redevelop. But it could take 50 years. And the question is, do we want to create the walkability, livability, and do we want it to be done in a thoughtful way that's safe for pedestrians, that's attractive for businesses and residents, that spurs the full potential of the tax growth? And I think that's the choices. Those are the choices that are before us now as we move forward. And I think the answer is accelerate it and double down on it, not delay it and walk away from it. So I just,
I don't know who's talking about delaying and walking away from it. I'm not. Maybe you can share more of what you.
Well, when I hear sequencing, when I hear the conversations earlier about transit versus walkability, it's not transit versus walkability. Transit is walkability. 355 BRT project is the core of,
you may be
that.
reacting then to my comments. I don't know, but
yeah, could I chime in at some point here?
Yeah, let me just make a quick comment and then I'll turn to you. I don't know if you're referring to my comments or not, but the point that I'm making is, let's get focused on implementing this plan and spend more of our public resources on building the infrastructure that we know we need there. And let's stop waiting for a $1 billion, total rebuild of Rockville Pike. Let's build this area out to be what it needs to be in order for it to become an appealing and attractive urbanized area. And I do think we will get 355 BRT built. We probably need federal funding to actually make that full-blown line happen. But first of all, I think we're doing what I am calling for us to do now. For the first time in a while, we are actually now spending money on removing some hot rights and buying street furniture. Like, that's because of this conversation that we should be executing more here and now and not just waiting for the grand plan one day. And so what I'm calling for is more of that. Like, let's keep pushing it forward in that manner. And then that will help us succeed today rather than succeeding, in 20 years. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you. I guess listening to all this for the last, hour or so, I just want to, maybe it's planning. They wrote the report. I mean, the way Ms. Sanders teed it up, there was to Councilmember Friesen's point, there was kind of like, we need to do one now and kind of wait on the other. That did come across, and your comments reflected that as well, Mr. Reamer. And if that's not what we're saying, that's fine. I think we all have, vigorous agreement that we want both and. The question is, what exactly does, we've had this slide up for a long time here, prioritize funding. So if you could get into what exactly you mean, or what examples, and if it's not your recommendation or what you've heard from folks, like what are the specific things that you'd want to see happen now versus, or not versus, but regardless of what happens with the BRT, and just kind of what you mean when you say prioritize. If you're not saying don't do one or don't do the other, I kind of hear that you're like, hey, no matter what happens, we've got to do this. And what is this? And what do you mean by that? And what are those things? I think getting more specific might help.
Sure thing. I really appreciate that comment, Councilmember Joando, because I do want to make sure it comes across clear that I'm not prioritizing, walking over transit. That's not what I'm. That wasn't my objective.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. What I'm trying to just simply say is that, it's things like, to give you more specific examples, and Walker, I know you're on the call too, so you could definitely chime in, but to give you a specific example, our staff and the community kind of crossed the intersection in Old Georgetown on 355, and it took upwards, just by pushing the button and trying to cross the crosswalk, it took upwards of like 10 minutes just to get from like one corner to the other. So things like changing the signal timing, which is, sort of low-hanging fruit and in terms of walkability, would be great. And I think like that would be a huge improvement to improve walkability. Or other examples that we have a sort of a walking assessment that we been working with DOT on, that kind of maps out a lot of the intersections where we're seeing issues. Creating a buffer between the sidewalk and the travel lane, so that like, if you're walking along the street, you're not like walking along an area where a car is going by you at 50 miles per hour. That can be pretty intimidating. Yeah. So I think, these things would complement transit and make transit safer. And I totally agree that they both have to happen for sure. And this has been a great discussion for us, because we can kind of see, when we have those priorities up there, what you all are interested in. That was sort of the goal of the discussion for us, is like, understanding better what the priorities are. And I think what we're hearing is that, bus rapid transit's a very big priority, and that, everything that we do should be supporting that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And if your other colleagues want to chime in. But yeah, I worked off of Old Georgetown Road at Worksession Montgomery for about a year, and I used to walk all around that area and you're right, it's not hospitable, and we do need to do things to make that much better. And hearing some of those specific things is really helpful, and I'd agree with that 100%. But at the same time, it's a long, Rockville Pike's big, and we know people want to get up and down it. There's many things people want to do, and it would make it more. It's an absolute priority to make it more accessible and easier to navigate for folks to get BRT. So I appreciate you reiterating that we need to do both, and I agree. So that's helpful to me. I know when we did the Veers Mill Master Plan and we had these complete streets model, obviously we want all streets to be complete, and we want every mode to have its own protected area. So I didn't know if you were calling for like massive investment to do that right now. Obviously 355, I think point was made earlier. We've got this infrastructure at the federal level. Obviously the state has to be involved here. There's a lot going on. So you can speak to that, but that was helpful. Those specifics were helpful.
So I can also chime in here again, Walker Freer for the record. Just speaking to the overall kind of incremental transportation improvements for Rockville Pike, one of the county's priorities is Vision Zero, eliminating traffic fatalities in the next 10 to 15 years. And so some of what we're starting to see along Rockville Pike is specific intersection treatments and reconfigurations that make it safer and easier for pedestrians to really cross this massive divider. So for the example of the White Flint Metro Station access improvements, eliminating the channelized right turns reduces an extra crossing that pedestrians have to make. They no longer have to cross that channelized turn to then cross the intersection. So you're reducing the crossing distance. You're increasing the crossing time. If you can look at the signal retiming, as Carrie mentioned, and even just providing a 6-foot landscape buffer along Rockville Pike, as is being done here this spring. Our internal analysis hasn't shown that greatly reduces or increases pedestrian comfort, reduces the kind of stress that pedestrians experience being so close to a major arterial highway where you have vehicles that are traveling at a minimum of 40 miles per hour in free flow, possibly up to 50 or 55. And so that's why in the interim and immediately we want to focus on reducing those speed limits, working within the curb to curb section with SHA, with NCDOT, just to make this a safer corridor, but also a more attractive and appealing corridor, which in turn should help attract investment from developers.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Well, I guess I just want to say again, you know, I believe in the transformational power of a surface level transit system on 355. You know, it's to really make it work, you have to rebuild every block of 355. You know, to make it truly what we have been talking about. So, you know, that's going to be a really intensive process. And the private sector is a huge piece of that because a lot of that happens through redevelopment. So, you know, I think we've got to get moving in White Flint at the same time as we advance plans for a bigger BRT system. We've just got to get moving, rebuilding this area. And, you know, we are doing some of those workarounds, but, you know, we know that the tax district isn't producing the revenue that we hoped because there's not enough development to generate revenue. And I think we've just got to put our shoulder to the wheel on the public infrastructure in this area and build it. And then we'll get the environment that we want there, and we'll see all of the, I think we'll see a lot of economic development impact. So, and, you know, meanwhile, come up with a viable strategy to build the whole 355 BRT solution. All right. Let's see any. Atul, maybe I'll ask you for some comments additionally, or Natasha as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. I think this is a very timely discussion because of a few things. One, that you know, you all, the council, will be sort of considering ways to make changes or enhancements to the taxing district, which I think is a very important piece of all of this. You know, we're also coming to the tail end of the Western Workaround, which was a major infrastructure project that the county undertook. And as we sort of come to the tail end of that, this is the time to think about all these things, I think, as a group between you all, and sort of see, okay, what's the next big thing we want to take on in the Pike District? So I think this is great that we are having this conversation. The other thing I think maybe worth having and hearing your thoughts about is this idea that, you know, if we are going to do a lot of activation, placemaking, branding in the Pike District, you know, the places like this do typically depend on an entity to kind of be the point entity to sort of take control of this, and that activation be the point person, be responsible, coordinate between everyone. And we know that initially when the plan was done, the idea was that there would be a bid established and the bid would be that entity to do that. And that is still, again, it's in the same vein of the previous conversation where a bid is probably the best long-term entity to do that. But we've also heard from stakeholders and property owners as well that, you know, they're maybe not quite there yet. So is it worthwhile to try to establish an urban partnership of some sort that has maybe a sunset clause to it, or has a time frame that is sort of assigned to it to continue and scale up? I think the work that Ken and Meyer Warner have done is fabulous, fantastic work. But is there a way to scale that up? And I think what we've seen in our analysis of other areas is when you scale up, you need an entity whose only sole job is to do that scaling up of branding, placemaking, activation. And with the bid not being on the imminent horizon, is it worthy of the council and the county to consider of setting up some sort of an interim sort of entity that can scale those things up? So we would love to hear your thoughts on that as well, because I think that was the other large sort of missing piece that we heard from in talking with both property owners and community members.
Yeah, well, personally, I think so. I mean, I was really impressed by the presentation from Meyer Warner and Ken Hartman, and I thought, you know, they I think we need an interim approach to what would be the long-term idea of having a bid there. That'd be private managed, privately operated. But I think there's a lot of people there already, and I think it gets back to the same kind of philosophy of let's focus on what we can do now, and let's implement ideas that pay off now. And I think creating a bit more of a scene there for the area, and regular programming, I think it'd be really helpful. So I think it sounds right on the money. I would absolutely support moving forward with a strategy. It needs to be very clear what the long-term approach is, so that people get into something and they know, okay, well, one day it's going to shift over. Like county might be willing to provide funding at the front end, but here's the long-term strategy. Like that all has to be really clearly laid out, so there's no surprises and everybody knows what they're getting into. I think this is an important piece of it, and I think you can often have a much bigger impact with programming, than you think. And so, Andrew.
Yeah, appreciate it. There are efforts underway as we speak to do exactly that. So, I think, this is a question of accelerating it and committing to it, not a question of if we're going to do it. This didn't start with planning, frankly, or with this particular project. It didn't start with the council's request to have this. The implementation committee, has been discussing it. There's a number of groups within the area that involve the relevant stakeholders that would be part of that group. And, the question is, what does that look like? How does it work? How do we, start it, and how do we move to the next step of it? But I think this, unlike in other places, because there's a pseudo tabula rasa here, it's much easier to create a bid, frankly, without some of the challenges that you perhaps would have in other places. Wheaton already does have an urban, environment, and a wide variety of different areas. So it would be more challenging in Wheaton today to do it. Not to say that it shouldn't be done or couldn't be done, but it is different here just because of the nature. This is a suburban, auto-centric, collection of shopping centers and shopping mall that is being turned into an urban environment. It does lend itself well to this type of structure. The question is, when is the right time? How is it structured? Who, what are the boundaries? Who's paying in? How much are they paying in? What's the county's, commitment? Who staffs it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is being worked out now. I think the good news is there's widespread agreement, not just on a ultimate bid, but on the vision of the area. That's unique to this area as well. There is resident, business, property owner, broad support for what the interest is for the infrastructure projects and for the development patterns, and I think for the structure of much of this. That is something that we should take advantage of. There's not always as much consensus in the county on huge undertakings like this, as there is here. So we should seize upon it, build upon it, and where we can, accelerate it.
All right. Okay. Carrie, did you receive guidance that you were seeking? Any questions for us?
Probably more than you wanted, Carrie.
No, that's very helpful. And, this has been a great discussion. I think we've learned a lot. And I think, I know you all are considering the budget, and I'm sure that there'll be lots of hard decisions before you. But if we can be any resource with this study, provide any data to you from the work that we've done as you're weighing the budget decisions. We're here to assist. So wanted to offer that up as our last closing comment.
Thank you. Great. All right. Thank you so much. Great presentation, great report, very helpful. I think the conversation is shifting, and I hopefully we'll get a lot more wins and forward steps in the near term here. So terrific. Appreciate it. Great work.
Thank you all.
Bye.
All right. So now we're bringing in the next planning team to talk about ZTAs. And Livu, welcome. All right. Good morning. And Pam, okay. And there's Casey. Good. Okay, so Livu, thank you for your packet. I thought it was very clear. Appreciated it. Why don't you get us started on ZTA 2008? All
right, good morning, everybody. So this ZTA was introduced by Council President Hucker at the request of the Planning Board. And the purpose of this CTA is what it does is two main things. It adds additional terms under the umbrella of residential care facility, and that's to provide seniors with more flexibility in terms of their housing options. So it allows housing types that are not just going to be multi-unit or apartments. You can have duplexes, detached homes, etc. And it'll still require assisted living services since it's still all under that residential care facility umbrella. So currently residential care facilities are allowed in a multi-unit building, and the zoning ordinance references continuing care retirement communities, but didn't actually define it. So the way I started the packet is I know there's a lot of different definitions for all the different types of senior care and housing. So first I have all those definitions. If you want me to run through them, sure, Remer, I can do that. But otherwise they're just there for everybody's reference.
Sure. Why don't you just please, describe them at a high level?
Sure. So residential care facility is a group care or similar arrangement, and it's for the care of people in need of personal services, supervision, or assistance, essential for sustaining the activities of daily living. Activities of daily living is somewhat of a term of art, so that's things like your housekeeping, shopping, cooking, your daily living activities. So the facility has to meet all applicable federal, state, and county certificates and licenses and regulatory requirements. There has to be resident staff necessary for operation of the facility who are allowed to live on site. And then the number of residents includes members of staff who reside there, but does not include infants younger than 2 months old. So residential care facility, as I said earlier, is kind of a larger umbrella. It includes nursing homes, assisted living facilities, continuing care retirement communities, hospices, and group homes. It does not include a hospital, and it does not include an independent living facility for seniors or persons with disabilities. So then an independent living facility for seniors or persons with disabilities is a building that contains dwelling units and related services for senior adults or persons with disabilities. And that includes meal preparation and service, daycare, personal care, nursing, therapy, any service that a senior adult or disabled population needs as an ancillary part of that operation. So as you can see from those two, a lot of the differences mostly like the level of care that's required to be provided. So a continuing care retirement community was not actually defined in the Montgomery County zoning ordinance, but it does have a state definition. So under state law, it's providing shelter and providing either medical and nursing or other health-related services, making those services readily accessible through the provider or an affiliate of the provider, whether or not they're specifically offered in the written agreement for shelter. And that's to an individual who's at least 60 years of age and not related by blood or marriage to the provider, for the life of the individual or for a period exceeding 1 year, and under one or more written agreements requires a transfer of assets or an entrance fee, notwithstanding periodic charges. The next term I defined, because this is going to be a requirement in this new definition of the ZTA, is an assisted living program, also not specifically defined in our code, but does have a state law definition. and it means a residential or facility-based program that provides housing and supportive services, supervision, personalized assistance, health-related services, or a combination thereof that meets the needs of individuals unable to perform or who need assistance in performing the activities of daily living or instrumental activities of daily living that promote optimum dignity and independence for the individuals. And then lastly, I defined a dwelling unit because I know we all know the term dwelling unit, but it is a building or portion of a building providing complete living facilities for not more than one household, including at a minimum facilities for cooking, sanitation, and sleeping. So those are all the relevant definitions for this CTA.
Okay. A lot of definitions there. I think it's an important point though, because the general point you're making here is that what the CTA is proposing to do is to allow a different kind of building to be used for the kinds of programs that you've described. And today, the zoning code does not allow for those to be applied to smaller scale buildings, basically smaller scale housing. It's really only these larger complexes, and there may be people who want to live in a smaller scale complex, a single unit or a duplex or something like that. And why wouldn't we want to also allow for that kind of pattern, that development pattern? So my only general question about it is, I noticed that there's this provision that some of the properties would be sold, the fee simple issue. I know that you can buy a house in Leisure World. Leisure World is a community that has care. And so I'm not sure that it's inherently problematic that properties could be sold, but I am a little, I'd be interested in how it fits together, if some of these properties of the residential units that were on them became for sale, like what would that mean? But let me ask Chair Anderson, for his comments here and hear what why planning board has recommended this.
Yeah, we think that this is relatively innocuous and responsive to the desire to provide a broader range of options for age-restricted housing. And we think that some of the objections that have been raised, frankly, elevate form over substance. I think everybody recognizes that there's a need for a broad range of housing choices. People are choosing to live in ways that are somewhat different than they have in the past, and we should try to be responsive to that. And rather than ask the question, why should regulations be relaxed, the question should be, why do we have regulations concerning the form of these types of housing in the first place? So in general, we're very supportive of this and think that it's responsive to demands that, one way of saying this is it's a responsiveness to market preferences, but that's really another way of saying it's a response to the way that human beings want to live their lives. And so we think that the presumption really should be in favor of being a little bit more flexible, perhaps, than we had been in the past. I do want to allow, if you'll permit it, Ben Berbert had some minor concerns, but I think that they're important to highlight about some of the very technical issues related to the development standards in this proposal. But I would say that in general, we would encourage you to support this CTA. But if it's appropriate now, I'd like to turn it over to Ben to describe some of those issues.
That's fine. Councilmember Friedson, did you want to ask a question now, or did you want to hear from Mr. Berbert?
Yeah, well, mine's more high level, so maybe before we get into the details, I know Mr. Berbert is probably going to be very specific and technical. I just wanted to make a comment and ask a question, if that's okay with you.
Go ahead.
Great. Well, first of all, I appreciate it. I think the lifestyles are changing, life expectancy is changing, the demographics of the county are changing, and I think the dynamics of what a senior living facility looked like 20 or 30 years ago is different from what they're increasingly looking like today, and what the needs and expectations are for aging adults who are living longer, who are increasingly looking for more campus-like settings, for more active lifestyles than before, but need services and need a community. So I think that that is reflected here. But I also had heard quite a bit of concern about the initial proposal that has been adapted. Of whether or not this was a way to get around zoning, as opposed to adapting zoning to meet current needs. Concerns about whether or not this was effectively an end run around zoning in order to get a housing type that otherwise wouldn't be allowed in a particular zone. This has changed quite a bit from what was originally conceived or proposed. So I was just hoping if it would be possible just to note that and maybe explain how this started, how what the concerns were, and how it's evolved, because I think that's a key part of the conversation, at least for my consideration.
Yeah, and I think Ben can address those issues as well, since he's followed this from the beginning without getting too much, and we can kind of come back to the more technical issues. But I think what this boils down to is that there in the past there's been this idea that senior housing is something that's just completely a different thing, and that's becoming less true as far as whether or not you can allow a duplex in a zone that ordinarily wouldn't allow it. I guess I come back to the question, what is functionally the importance of the limitation that's in the zoning code on a particular building type? I mean, we should be asking ourselves, not is this different than, or does this allow something a broader range of options than would otherwise be provided by the zoning code, but what are the purposes served by those restrictions in the zoning code, and can those public interests be protected if in fact they are important public interests that we think remain relevant, consistent with allowing a different type of housing for senior citizens or anyone else. But I'd suggest we turn to Ben maybe for some, if you'd like to kind of walk through the evolution of the proposal and maybe end up with some of his concerns about where it's landed on some of these more minor technical issues.
That would be great. I do think it's important to note where this started, where it is now, and then if there are any concerns that you have on the technical issues that we should address and discuss, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the PHED committee. To sort of just talk about the bigger picture for a minute, we've seen conditional use, old special exception, and now conditional use requests coming in for years for senior housing, and it's almost always taken the form of an apartment building type, particularly these sort of smaller projects. I think we all know there are a couple of large projects, Leisure World being one of them, that actually kind of is a big version of what this ZTA is hoping to get at on a smaller scale, where you have, independent dwelling units, you have assisted dwelling units, you have full-on nursing care all within the same community, and they take on different building types depending on kind of the form and function of the stage of life that someone's in. And we started getting some more requests a couple of years ago to actually do, age-restricted housing, both at a less restrictive level, which we're not covering here, but as well as at a full continuum care level that this ZTA would be addressing. And proposals were coming before us that were showing duplexes and townhouses as part of that mix for the people that needed the lesser amounts of care. And then there would still be an apartment type building somewhere else on the property that would contain kind of the community center, would actually have the medical services, the dining services, attached to the people that have the highest need, but then also have the ability for the rest of the community to use those facilities as needed. And looking at the zoning as it's written, kind of scratched our head and said, well, this zoning really doesn't seem applicable to a townhouse or duplex building type. I don't think the code actually explicitly said it one way or the other, but in looking at sort of the setback standards and more problematically, the definition requirements that these services being rendered have to be housed in the same structure as the residents living, it kind of left no conclusion except that it had to be an apartment building type. And so this ZTA has turned into one that is trying to get at that continuum care type development. I think some of the initial concerns that were raised by the community was that some early proposals that we'd seen, and this is on multiple sites, this actually isn't just on one site, really was just a bunch of townhouses that were age restricted. You know, I think in working with these interested developers, we've gotten to a point of realizing there should be multiple tiers of care, and so that, you know, this isn't just creating townhouses in an RE1 or RE2 zone for you know, older people. This actually is creating a care community. And so that is sort of the evolution that we've seen, and I think it's one that does make a lot of sense, especially when you think of it on like the Leisure World example. We already have this, just that was built under, I believe it's like the old PD type zone where it's a much larger property and there was lots of inherent flexibility. But why wouldn't that and shouldn't that work, particularly when you really think about a duplex or a townhouse is potentially even being more compatible in some of these residential zones than an apartment building type would be. And so that's kind of the bigger picture of how this has evolved and why I think staff thinks this is a really good idea.
Okay, and an additional comment, projects that are conditional use are still conditional use, and projects that are limited use are still limited use. You know, this is changing what kinds of buildings can be built. We've received a lot of emails from some residents in neighborhoods that are near, I think, one proposed project. And I understand that that's a conditional use. And so it has a lot of process ahead of it. You know, there will be a chance for the public to weigh in through the conditional use process on that specific project. What we are confronted with is a situation where we see that we have a somewhat anachronistic zoning code that would affect projects all over the county and prevent a housing type that we would want to be able to have this kind of assisted living and doesn't have it. And so, you know, why would we want to hold back a broader evolution in senior living and assisted living, you know? And those who are having, you know, have some concerns about a specific project, you know, you have your day in court. That's for sure. You know, it's coming up. Okay.
If I may, on the more technical side, and Livu, I don't know if you want to discuss on page 3, item number 4, if you want to tee it up very briefly.
Can I just step in for 1 second?
Sure, bam.
People that haven't followed it, and I have, so this is all, you know, it's kind of going back and forth a little bit.
Part of the handoff, yes.
Well, Livu did the definitions, but she didn't really explain the ZTA. So maybe before Ben talks about the things that he has concerns with, we just let Livu at least explain what's before the committee and what her recommendation is.
Oh, yes.
He can address any concerns he has. Is that okay?
Please, good idea.
All right, so we have talked about the public hearing and planning board's recommendations, so I'm going to skip to the proposed amendments on page 3. So as originally introduced, the ZTA came up with a definition for a continuing care retirement community, which is going to do what we've discussed in terms of allowing different building types. There was some concern that, as I said earlier, continuing care retirement community already has a definition under state law. And so for somebody coming to Montgomery County who wants to do a development, that could be really confusing that it's 2 different definitions. So, but we did still have the problem of the zoning ordinance not actually defining a continuing care retirement community. So instead, that same definition that was in the original ZTA is now going to be applied to a new term, which is going to be senior care community. And then under continuing care retirement community, it will just say a type of residential care facility structured in a manner consistent with the Code of Maryland. So it'll just refer to the state definition. So that's made more clear in the ZTA overall.
Livu, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't quite follow this. So what you're saying, you're referring us now to additional language that you're recommending to the ZTA?
Correct.
and then you're referring us to the lines. So for example, on the first one, lines 19 to 24, when you go down to the ZTA, you see there lines 19 to 24. The double underline, that's what you're recommending to add to the ZTA?
Yes, the double underline is the addition.
Okay, got it.
And the definition itself hasn't changed. It's just being used for a different term, basically. And then to provide some consistency, so little technical things. So a senior care community, this is now number 3. So a senior care community is now going to be listed under residential care facility. And then also have the same age restrictions that a continuing care retirement community has, which I believe is 62 years of age. And then the final proposed amendment that staff recommends is setting setback requirements for all building types. Originally, since we were only having these in multi-unit buildings, the way this residential care facility language was structured really only made sense for apartment buildings. So now if we're going to allow all different building types, then we need different setbacks for all of those different types of buildings. So staff's recommendation was first that the easiest thing to do would be to refer to a zone that already exists rather than reinventing the wheel and coming up with all new setbacks for this one use. So the zone that was recommended, that's recommended by staff, is the R30 zone, which already allows all different building types. And so by using R30, you have all those building types and they already have setbacks. So if you want a residential care facility, no matter what zone you're in, you just look to R30 and use whatever standards would be allowed there.
Okay. Okay, great.
Sorry, and then the last piece is we wanted to make sure, because there has been community concern about having basically a house and an apartment right next to it, or a huge campus right next to a detached house, that the minimum setback is still going to stay 20 feet to abutting lots. So on the outside of the development, you'll still have that 20-foot buffer.
Okay. Okay, any comments on staff's recommended amendments to the ZTA? And then, I guess we can, Andrew, yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear from planning, particularly on the last items, and get their perspective. And then I also think it'd be helpful in the R30 just to explain what the setbacks, or at least in broad strokes, we don't have to go through, kind of for the main building types, what the setbacks would be, since we're voting on it here.
All right.
Maybe we can start with planning and then go to the R30.
You beat me to the punch. That's what I was gonna call on planning for those comments. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can actually help there because I have the R30 zoning standards pulled up. The principal setbacks for detached houses, duplexes, or townhouses from the front, so from the street, would be at 20 feet. For the apartment building type, it's a 30-foot front setback. Side setbacks, if they're sort of internal lots, and it's abutting other residential uses and residential detached or townhouse zones. For the detached house, duplexes, and townhouses, it's 6 feet. And this is why I think the recommendations there for 20 feet for abutting other lots, because if that provision was not there, you in theory could have a duplex or detached house on this site that's only 6 feet away from the edge of the property. For the apartment building type, it gets a little more confusing. And Pam or Levy might be better able to walk through the provisions of section 4.1.8. And then rear setbacks broadly are 20 feet, again, for detached duplex and towns, and 30 feet for the apartment. One of the main issue that I really have in the way all of this is worded, more than it is an intent issue, is on page 6 of kind of the amended ZTA, lines 92 through 99. The way it reads is just a little confusing to me, because it starts by saying that principal building setbacks for all building types must meet the minimum setbacks required under the standard method of development for that subject building type in the R30 zone. And that part, I think, is clear. And then it says, or a minimum setback of 20 feet to lots abutting to abutting lots not included in this application, whichever is greater. It's the insertion of the or and then having what to me seems like a totally separate requirement of creating that setback to abutting zones. It's kind of, to me, it's not written the cleanest way. And I think it leaves a lot of confusion potentially when trying to implement this later. I think some of the back and forth that we've had on this is partly based around the idea of whether or not there would be subdivision that occurs with one of these properties. I think one of the reasons for including this requirement of looking at the R30 zone setback standards is under the premise that there could potentially be subdivision for the duplex and townhouse lots if they're being used for the more independent living side of the actual uses allowed through this use. You know, I think if there was not anticipated subdivision, if this truly were a campus and you were just putting all of the buildings on the same one lot, which is also allowable, I kind of at some point question, is there even a purpose in even referencing the R30 zone standards so long as there's the 20-foot minimum setback from abutting lots? So, you know, I kind of look at it as there's sort of two solutions here. Kind of leave the intent there that the R30 standards are applicable if there's going to be subdivision occurring. And then there would sort of be a separate clause just saying you otherwise also need to make sure you're at least 20 feet away from abutting lots. Or I think we just could probably get rid of reference to the R30 in general and just say you need to keep the abutting lots. And Pam's shaking her head, so.
I didn't see Pam shaking her head. Was that a shaking your head yes or a shaking your head no?
Was I shaking my head no? And Livu is, I don't want to take this away from Livu. It's really her item. I'll just say that we have gone back and forth. We've also tried to engage some of the stakeholders who develop these types of projects because, again, the idea here isn't to make it more difficult. It's really to accommodate what we think can occur. And we did hear from stakeholders. They mostly see this, and they've only seen it to date primarily as a campus setting. So having the or in there was, okay, you're doing a campus setting. You don't need to worry about the R30 zones for the individual different building types as the ZTA is now allowing because you're doing a campus. You're not going to create a lot. You're going to have a big campus. You're going to have one very large lot, and we want you set back a certain distance. And currently today in the code, it's 20 feet from neighboring properties. Your side setback from neighboring properties is 20 feet. So we kept that. If it doesn't specifically say it under the conditional use standards, you go to what the underlying zone allows. So currently today, when the code says you have to be set back a side setback of 20 feet. You're building one of these apartment building, nursing, residential care facilities. You have to be 20 feet from your neighbor on the side. It doesn't provide you with a rear setback. It doesn't provide you with a front setback. So planning staff will go to the code and say, okay, this is in an RE2 zone, an RE1 zone. What is that front setback? They look at the single family detached house. That is the only structure that's really allowed there. And it's also allowed for conditional use. So they just look at that one. The rear setback might be 20 feet currently, so it equals that side setback. Or just for sake of discussion, it might be 30 feet. They'll take that rear setback then. It might be 30 feet for a front setback. They will take that setback as well from the base underlying zone. The point is, moving forward, we do know people might want to make these individual lots saleable. They may not be doing it currently, but if we're going to change this use now to make it a more updated version of itself, we want to offer like the whole world. And so if in fact the internal lots are going to get created as lots, you will see it's not a campus setting, then the staff and DPS even, they need to know, well, when this house is being constructed on the internal portion of this, how must it react to its neighbors? We have to provide a setback. If we go to the underlying zone, it's not going to be appropriate. An RE2 zone is really meant for a residential estate on a 1 acre lot. We know that the internal created lots on something like this may be very small. So that's why we went to R30, which is an apartment zone, which has building types for different types of units, with the idea that if you were in an apartment setting, but you wanted to create more development and with smaller structures, you would have very small setbacks because that would be appropriate. So I do believe we need both because I think we can't predict in the future that no one's going to want to put an individual lot internal to one of these campuses. But I'll let Livu weigh in. I talked too long.
Honestly, I don't have that much to add to what Pam said. I mean, I agree. I think that this does cover both, which is why it says or whichever is greater, because I think it preserves what people expected in their communities before, while also creating guidelines for if you do those interior lots, which is why we decided to add in the setbacks at all. So I guess my one addition is I don't really think it's a reasonable option to leave it the same, because there's just nothing that the planning staff is going to be able to look to if people want to do all these different styles.
And it's the grader that is important. It's an important operative there. Andrew.
Thanks. Would it help at all, perhaps Ben, based on that, if we just made two separate clauses? The first clause would be the minimum setback to abutting properties is 20 feet, and then a separate clause that would say, in the case of a I'm paraphrasing here, but in the case of a subdivision, R30, would that address the confusion in implementation? And then I'll hear from Pam, who's going to tell me that she doesn't think that's going to work.
I think that's sort of actually staff's first preference, because I completely agree that I think we need to have standards assuming a subdivision could occur in the future. And I think the R30 zone is a great standard to set for that. It makes sense. I've looked at it. I think it's just the way it's written. I could see confusion occurring where somebody goes, okay, well, the side setback for a lot in the R30 zone is 6 feet for this type when creating the lots, and then it just says, or I have to look at 20 feet to the side. I think the way it's written probably is technically right. It's given me and some other people in our office enough pause that I think even just having it as two separate, an E and an F, just makes it so much cleaner to implement, and kind of takes away the concern or the intent later. And so you'd have the first one just saying you're using the standards of the R30 zone, and the second one can just say you also must make sure that all structures have at least a 20-foot setback from all abutting zones. And I just think it's a little bit of an easier interpretation than the way it's written now, and that's really the only concern I intended to raise in the first place.
Pam, what's your concern with that?
So I have less concern with the way Ben described it. If we can split it in two, Levu and I can look at that type of draft, I'm not as concerned. I don't think I would reference the word subdivision in it. I think it's really just this idea that, you're creating these structure types, they would have the setbacks of the R30 zone, and or, at a minimum, your setback from neighboring properties, not in the application, which is how it's written now. So it's, you are doing this type of use, and you will bring in your application, you'll show where you're building it, but you obviously have abutting properties not in your application. And so what this is saying is the setbacks for those abutting properties is at a minimum 20 feet, or whichever is greater. And the way we had it in there is, there are what are called compatibility standards for that apartment building in the R30 zone. And there could be cases where that setback might be a little more than 20 feet. And we did bring that up with the stakeholders. If this goes in, currently today you have a side setback of 20, it could be slightly larger if we have the compatibility standards associated with apartment buildings in the R30 zone as we have. And they didn't have a problem with it. They said this doesn't increase it enough to cause these things not to be buildable. And again, like I said, some of the things not currently in the code today, like those front setbacks, those rear setbacks, they go to the underlying zone and they can be quite large. Just thought it was a good consistency that we were trying to retain, for the most part, what people can do today for that apartment building, provide more standards for the non-apartment building types, and be recognizing compatibility with neighboring properties not in the application. So that was the whole piece of what Levu and I were trying to write in that section. And we thought it works. I think technically it does work. If what Mr. Berbert is saying is that staff may have a harder time implementing it, we can look at breaking it into two different things. But
my personal thought is, I think it's important points that you raise. I think they're two separate things. So separating them would be better, because one is about abutting properties, setting the standard for abutting properties. I read minimum, meaning it could always be more, but certainly can't be less under the code. And then the R30 zone is about the project itself, within the applicant's property. So I think separating them out to avoid confusion makes sense. I'll yield to you on, what the language would be, but I do think having them combined and having the 20-foot abutting property being, a secondary, like a second clause in that, I can see where the confusion might lie. So I think that would be preferred.
Okay. So we'll create a separate clause. Ben, any other comments on the other amendments from staff, council staff?
I think we've worked closely with council staff on this, and I think it's a good ZTA. I think it's going to bring some positive change to the development of these communities, and we still support it as planning staff.
Great. Okay, so any objection to the staff recommended amendments? All right, so seeing none, we'll ask you to, for full council, send along the revised as we've discussed here and just bounce it off us before it goes to full council so everyone sees that it was what we discussed. Okay. All right, well, again, I know there's a little consternation about this, but the particulars of a specific project is a different conversation, and that will happen in its own context, its own process, and we invite the community to weigh in on that. And for these purposes, we're seeking to provide a broader range of housing types for senior assisted living, continuing care. I think with the growth of our older population, retirement of the baby boom, we've got to be ready. We've got to allow for more kinds of living arrangements. And so this is very consistent with work we've undertaken, for example, accessory dwelling units to create some flexibility in the code. So, all right. So we have an amended ZTA. Show of hands, all those in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you to planning. Thank you to Livu and Pam. And we are done for the day. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.